Coming up, a special report on Ukrainian refugees who have found shelter in Moldova, and a restoration project brings 2,000-year-old date trees back to life.
Thank you for joining us on the 700 Club Canada. And today we're talking obviously about Israel, but also we're honoring seniors because it's Seniors Month.
One thing I noticed when I was in Israel, Bill, is the culture of family, generational family, right? Many of them are living even with elderly, many generations, but they honor the elderly.
Absolutely.
They honor seniors. And I think in our culture, we've lost some of that.
Well, they're much more tightly knit as families.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's family looking out for family, from the young all the way until the elderly. And I think we could reclaim some of that. As a matter of fact, that's becoming a major issue for us as Canadians because we're growing in that Aryan demographic.
That's right. In fact, it's shocking to see the numbers of how many people are aging, right?
Right.
And you can also see all the retirement homes being built. I plan on moving into a really nice one, by the way. I want to get my name on the list early.
You have to now.
I know, but...
And so the theme in 2022 for Seniors Month is stay active, connected, and safe. And of course, they mean in the physical sense, but we want to encourage you today to think about it also in the spiritual sense. How are you doing? Are you well?
And from 1920 to 2020, the life expectancy for Canadians increased from around 60 to over 82 years of age. Think of that.
That's true.
My grandma was 100.
Wow.
So we've got longevity in our family.
And got a lot of life left.
Right? The number of seniors in all age groups is expected to continue to rise by 2041. Seniors are projected to comprise nearly a quarter of Canadians, Bill.
That's amazing.
Wow, it is.
So it's important that you stay healthy, not just physically and emotionally, but also relationally, as we talked about, and spiritually.
Yeah, don't count yourself out yet.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, now, this is how botanists in Israel are bringing 2,000-year-old date trees back to life. Now, that's a long time to live, 2,000 years. Makes me tired.
This little young-looking palm tree named Judith carries an ancient heritage.
We're talking about the resurrection of 2,000-year-old plus ancient date seeds that come from the Judean desert and from Masada, and which are part of a scientific experiment.
Growing in a greenhouse for the last 9 years, Judith was recently transplanted in what Kibbutz Keturah calls the ancient Judean date orchard. Journalists even pitched in to help. She's the 5th such tree to be planted there after Methuselah, Adam, Jonah, and Hannah.
We are planting our 2nd female date tree, who was sprouted from an ancient seed. Actually, this one came from Qumran, was found in the caves, and much to our astonishment, she also sprouted.
Hannah is the first female tree. She was planted outside in 2019, pollinated by Methuselah. Hannah had around 100 dates last year. This year, she had more than 600.
Dr. Sarah Salone, a medical doctor, started this project more than 15 years ago after becoming interested in natural medicine.
I wanted to see how medicinal the flora of Israel was and what it had been used for and so on. And then I realized that many of these species had actually disappeared. And we know what there was because it's mentioned in the Bible. The Bible is our guidebook of ancient species.
One that disappeared centuries ago was the Judean date. It's mentioned in the Bible as one of the 7 species found in the ancient land of Israel.
We see dates all the way along here, palm trees, and all the kibbutzim are growing plants, and look at the plantations on Keturah. Those date palms of modern-day Israel are modern, and they were imported after the founding of the state in the 1950s, but they're not the original date tree that grew here.
Years ago at Masada, archaeologists found a jar of those ancient date seeds.
In ancient times, the classical writers described in detail the dates of ancient Judea. Why? Because they were famous. They were big, they were sweet, they were very dry, that allowed them to be exported all over the Roman Empire, and they had medicinal qualities.
Salone obtained 5 of those original seeds and gave them to botanist Dr. Elaine Soloway. After devising a method to sprout them, Soloway has succeeded in sprouting seeds found in other places, such as the Qumran caves, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found.
I think the biggest problem is hydrating them, because if you hydrate them too quickly, you kill them, and you only get one crack in each seed. So far, we have 5 males and 2 females, 7 altogether. And I've tried lots of seeds, and most of them are deader than doornails.
15 years ago, the first tree Soloway sprouted was a male. They called him Methuselah, after the oldest person in the Bible. CBN News got its first look 10 years ago when Methuselah was still in the lab. More than 850,000 date trees grow in Israel. Soloway planted some 3,000 of them on Kibbutz Keturah, where each tree produces around 350 pounds of dates a year. Soloway and Salone are hoping eventually to add the revived Judean dates to the harvest.
We're going to be testing those dates in the future to see actually what they do and whether they differ from other commercial varieties of modern dates. So for the kibbutz, it's a big venture.
Dr. Tarek Abu Hamad, director of the Arava Institute, sees this as planting seeds from the past to bear a special kind of needed fruit for the future.
If you don't look back to the history, you will not see the future. And here we're actually planting history at the Arava Institute. We hope one day that with these trees that came from 2,000 years ago will be the hope of peace in our region.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Palm trees in ancient desert sands grew and satisfied almost every need the ancient Jews needed. The Jews ate the palm tree dates, the tree juices were fermented into wine, and the trunk of the palm tree was used as construction timber, and the palm leaves were woven into baskets, mats, brooms, beds, ropes, and made into furniture. Basically, the palm tree represented life. And if you saw one, you knew that water was nearby as well. And the palm tree was always a reminder to the nation of Israel that God was their provider. In exile, God promised that he would give safety to his people and bring them back into a good space. Listen to the promise in Ezekiel 47, verse 12, where it says, "Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit because the water from the sanctuary, God's presence, will flow onto them. Their fruit will serve for food and their leaves for healing." You know, the date palm was also one of the most ancient symbols of the tree of life and an emblem of triumph and victory. Maybe you didn't know this, but when Jesus was entering Jerusalem on Triumphal Friday, they were waving palm branches, right? Well, there was a reason, because it was actually a sign of protest. It was a sign of liberation. It was a sign of God's kingdom. So what they were basically saying is, go home, Rome. When Jesus was walking in, it was this palm branch that symbolized for them liberty and freedom in God. And so when Israel saw the palm tree, it was a reminder not only of God's provision, but also of God's victory. And of course, for us as followers of Jesus, there is another tree, the cross, that reminds us of this powerful truth as well. On the cross, God provided healing and gave us victory over our brokenness. And you can trust him today. So here's my question. Do you need God's life? Do you need his provision and his victory today? If so, call us at 1-855-759-0700. We have this great resource entitled Free Indeed, and we'd love to pray with you today. Up next, see how the country of Moldova is helping Jewish refugees from the Ukraine.
Evidence that Bigfoot is hiding in the hills behind my cousin's house. I'm serious, y'all.
On the jellyfish will help us solve the mystery of Atlantis.
This time, we really mean it. We are going to prove once and for all that aliens do exist. You might be sitting next to one right now.
I'm talking about the Bermuda Triangle.
The Loch Ness Monster.
Time travel.
We're here to tell you that we finally found it.
Here it is.
A family-friendly streaming app. And it's easy to use.
The CBN Family app. Discover life-changing stories, award-nominated documentaries, and incredible teachings. There's even something for the kids. The CBN Family app. Yep, it's real, all right.
Knew it was real.
Ukrainians forced to flee their homes because of war. Some of them Holocaust survivors, and others fleeing for a second time.
You can imagine the atmosphere, nervous tension, and an unpredictable destiny. What can one expect other than being murdered?
Almost all the buildings around us burned down. When a mortar hits a building, it starts a fire, and there are no means to extinguish it. There is no water in the city.
While a nightmare for many fleeing Ukrainians, these Jewish refugees have a unique hope for the future.
You heard in the borders, when the Jewish community waiting for people there, and there's buses, and they know where they're going to live, and they know that Israel is helping them to come, they say, if already to be a refugee, it's better to be a Jewish refugee.
The Israeli government and Jewish organizations are banding together to make it possible. Alona Grosu of the Jewish community of Moldova says when they heard about the war, they knew the world would never be the same.
So from this day, we've started organizing a rescue operation for the members of Jewish communities from Ukraine.
Overnight, the municipality in Chisinau, Moldova, opened its tennis center as a place for fleeing refugees, and the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews stepped in to help.
With the Jewish community, with the Joint, with all the organization, we built an opportunity to have places for the people to sleep, to eat, to be in a safe, warm place.
More than 10,000 eligible Ukrainians have immigrated to Israel since the war began. They are fleeing Ukraine through Poland, Hungary, Romania, and about a third escaped through Moldova. From the border, these refugees are taken either to the Israeli consulate or the Hub Tennis Center, where the Jewish agency determines their eligibility to immigrate to Israel. The Foreign Ministry provides them with papers, and the IFCJ books them on charter flights. That's where CBN News met Ludmila Polonova, her mother Tetiana, and 16-year-old son, Andrei.
It's a catastrophe. It was a miracle that we were able to leave Mariupol now. On March 12th, an aircraft bomb fell next to our house. All the windows, glass, window frames, and doors were shattered. It was impossible to stay in the apartment.
Ludmila and her family lived in the basement for a week.
We left thanks to my son. We found out that in the 9th-story building next door, there was a phone reception on the 9th floor. My son remembered that his classmate lived in the neighboring town of Mangush, and her father owned a minibus. My son ran to the 9th floor, called her, and her father took us out the very next day.
It wasn't the first time this family had to escape. They fled the Donetsk region in 2014. This time, they have a different outlook.
We expect some kind of well-being, a peaceful life. I want a future for my son.
I hope everything will go well in Israel. It's hard to move, of course. All my friends are in Ukraine. But at least there will be peace in Israel.
I think Israel is our salvation, and I think everything will go well for us.
Until their departure, refugees are housed at places like this guest house outside Chisinau. Holocaust survivor Zinovy Lakarev came here after he turned 86 on March 16th.
I didn't have a birthday. There was bombing and shelling. That's why I was at home. 2 rocket explosions happened about 50 to 60 meters from our house. These were frightful explosions. Everything shook. The entire 9-story building was shaking. That's when I decided to leave.
It brought back haunting memories.
In September 1941, under bombing and shelling of the trains we were in, we left the city. We returned to Kharkiv in March of 1944.
And 78 years later, with just a plastic bag in hand, Zinovy was on the run again. This time he has 2 daughters, 2 granddaughters, and a great-granddaughter waiting for him in Israel.
I'm very happy that I'm finally going to leave this hell. But it's very unpleasant and heavy for me.
When the hotels and guest houses were full, the Jewish community and volunteers opened this warehouse, where we met Vera Chimra. She also recalled her first time having to leave everything behind.
My first evacuation took place 81 years ago in 1941. I remember a freight car. There was a transit camp like this, only this one is comfortable. Back then, the only thing we had was a blanket.
Vera returned to Kharkiv after World War II and stayed put until now.
I feel more cheerful. I'm able to move again. Before, I stopped moving. I had COVID with bad complications. My leg was paralyzed. I couldn't even imagine that I'd travel such distances as I didn't leave the house for half a year.
So far, the IFCJ has helped more than 2,200 refugees fly to Israel from Moldova since the war started. but it's not a regular aliyah. Benny Haddad says they usually have a chance to prepare new immigrants before they come.
You're touching the people for 2 seconds. They're coming here, they want as much as faster to be there because they live as refugees here without anything. And the main goal is to send them to Israel and save them from here.
Zinovi and Ludmila, Tetiana and Andre were among 112 new immigrants and 9 pets CBN News joined on the 3-hour flight back to Israel. At the Kishinev airport, they were Ukrainian refugees, but within hours, they became citizens of Israel, fulfilling biblical prophecy.
We don't comprehend it yet.
Thank God there's no shooting. I hope I'll never hear it again. At my age, it's a new beginning. At this age, people hang up their fiddle completely, but I decided to change everything from the start.
That was the first day of their new adventure as Israelis. It may not be easy here, but they be planted in the land of their forefathers and should never have to run away again. Chris Mitchell, CBN News.
Well, it's hard for us to imagine what our Ukrainian brothers and sisters are going through. And it's so beautiful to see how Israel and many other countries are reaching out to provide refuge. And it just really struck me as I watched that news report, the bravery of all the ages, but especially the elderly, to have to uproot and leave everything at an older age. And I'm just so thankful for all the organizations who are working to help them safely get to Israel. And I was really struck by their cheerful spirit, especially those who had lived through the time of the Holocaust. I mean, it was just so impactful for me to see them talk about, you know, in the time of the Holocaust, that was a real, obviously, a race out of the country to find safety, and for them, uncomfortable and scary and only a blanket. And now, the one gentleman said, all I have is my paper bag, you know, or my plastic bag full of worldly goods, but there was a joy about this. So they're grateful for the shelter and the welcome that they're being given at this time. There's 2 lessons that stood out to me as I watched. I think one of them is, we don't know what tomorrow holds. So hold loosely to the things of this earth. And I think the second thing that stood out to me is we are to love and help those who are foreigners, who are refugees. In Deuteronomy 10, verse 19, it says, and you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt. This is the response in the heart of God. We have a resource called The Hope of Redemption. This is actually a devotional that I think you'd really enjoy. It comes from Israel, but it's really teaching on, from the time of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem all the way through his resurrection. So I encourage you to call us at 1-855-759-0700 for this free resource and, of course, for prayer. Up next, a reminder of Christ's sacrifice directly from the garden tomb.
Connect with us on social media to watch shows anytime and to access additional content.
Today, I stand and chat with you in front of a really special place, the Garden Tomb. It's said that Jesus was buried here after his crucifixion. When you look at the scriptures talking about the burial of Jesus, 2 people are mentioned. Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man who was a secret follower of Jesus, and then Nicodemus, a Pharisee who actually met with Jesus one-on-one to understand his teachings and to find out who he truly was. When I read through that scripture, I can't help but think of Joseph and Nicodemus taking Jesus's body off the cross, carrying it to a tomb really similar to this, preparing his body for burial, wrapping his broken, bloody body in linens, and anointing his body with ointment and perfume. I can't help but think of their heartbreak as they take his body off the cross and prepare someone that they admired and someone that they loved for burial. I can't help but think of the disciples and their disappointment. Somebody that they followed for 3 years, every single day they lived with this person. They ate with this person. They saw miracles. They heard Christ's teachings. A friend, Jesus was to them. A brother, Jesus was to them. I can't help but think of the women at the cross. Mary, the mother of Jesus. I can't help but think of their heartbreak and their disappointment as they watch from afar him take his last breath. I can't help but think of the disappointment, the heartbreak, the sorrow, and the grief that they all felt as Jesus was laid in this tomb. But here's the turning point. I can't help but think of the radical, unrivaled joy that each one of those people experienced when they realized his body was no longer in this tomb. I can't help but think of the mourning that was turned into dancing when Jesus himself appeared to them and said, "Here I am." I can't help but think of the joy as the angel appears to the women and says, "Don't be afraid. He is not here, for he is risen." I want to read a quote to you to encourage you wherever you're at right now in life. Nothing can harm you permanently. No loss is lasting, no defeat more than passing, and no disappointment final. Suffering, failure, loneliness, sorrow, discouragement, and death will be part of your journey. But the kingdom of God will conquer all of these horrors. No evil can resist grace forever. I don't know what disappointment you're going through. I don't know what heartbreak you're suffering from. I don't know what grief you can't seem to shake. But because Jesus is no longer in this tomb, and he is literally seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding for you and I, that means that grief cannot hold us. That means that we don't have to be heartbroken forever. That means that disappointments in life don't have to last forever. With Jesus, there is resurrection life. Friend, our darkest days are not the end. The best is yet to come for you. Put your hope and your faith in Jesus, because in Jesus, we will always and forever have hope.
Hi, I'm Ray McDonald, and on behalf of Leked Israel, the National Food Bank, I want to say thank you. Through your support of 700 Club Canada, you are partnering with what God is doing in fulfilling His covenant promises to the people of Israel. Together, we are providing food to 250,000 Israelis each week. So again, I want to say thanks, and God bless you.
If you're like me, I love how archaeology is exploring that the Bible is true, that you can count on the stories and the accounts found in there. And so today we have an incredible resource for you. It's called Written in Stone. It's about the kings and prophets. And so for a one-time donation, we'd love to put this into your hands. Not only will you get this amazing resource, but you'll also be supporting great ministries all across Canada, like the one you just saw. So why not call us today at 1-855-759-0700, make a donation, get this amazing resource, and make a difference in our world. Thank you so much.
Names from the Old Testament are being unearthed all over the city of Jerusalem.
this was amazing. Come as close as you can get to personalities that are known from the Bible.
Astonishing discoveries made today.
A jaw-dropping moment of Bible archaeology.
This is much more than a thrill. This is actual history that took place here on the site where we sit right now.
Confirm the kings and prophets of the Bible left real evidence of their lives.
Right time, the right place, with the right people.
And one of the most significant finds in recent history.
Exactly as the Bible tells us happened in the days of King Hezekiah.
Written in stone, kings and prophets.
We have the Bible and we have archaeologists. Here in our story, it's matching.
The Old Testament is a reliable history book.
Written in stone, kings and prophets.
You know, Lori, I've really enjoyed the reminder today in our show that God has always made a way for his people to be provided for and protected. Even the story we saw about Moldova and the refugees that are finding refuge there. And I think about how throughout history, God's people have moved from nation to nation to nation, but they've stayed together. God has kept his promise. And the encouraging thing for me is that God will keep his promise to me too.
You know, it's so true. Like I was saying at the beginning, you know, we're Gentiles, right? We got grafted into this family line, but we have the privileges of being part of God's plan. Absolutely. And I mean, it just overwhelms me sometimes because I think about God's faithfulness to his chosen people, and yet we're part of that family.
Well, it is kind of funny because when people say, you know, is God really good? I go, do you know history? Right. For thousands of years, he has proven, yes, he is good. And so in our maybe shorter lifetime, right, or whatever we think the time we have on this earth, God is going to be good for us as well. And I think that's amazing.
Absolutely. His faithfulness is through every generation.
Every generation.
And thanks for your encouragement. Bernice, you sent us a note and you said, thank you for the encouragement that you provide on a daily basis and the powerful work you are doing for the kingdom of God. That means so much, Bernice. Thank you for taking the time to tell us that.
Yeah, and Betty said, I love your program. I'm 83 years old, and I never miss a program. Well, Betty, thank you. We're so glad you're watching right now. We bless you today, and it is Seniors Month, so we do honor you today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, James chapter 1, verse 12 is our power verse today. It says, blessed is the one who perseveres, there it is, under trial, because having stood the test,
that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him.
Boy, there's a reward for perseverance, right?
Yes, so hang in there.
Yeah, and as we get old, we need a lot of tenacity.
I agree.
Well, we honor and bless those of you who are senior. Thanks for watching today.
To contact us, visit 700club.ca.
Tomorrow on the 700 Club Canada, Pastor Les Markham is here to discuss opportunities for seniors, and a couple put their own business ambitions aside to help others.
Connect with us on social media to watch shows anytime and to access additional content.